There are days when the sky shifts quietly, and then there are days that redraw the emotional landscape beneath your feet. Today belongs to the second kind. This is not simply another astrological headline to glance at before moving on. This is Monday, July 27th, and the heavens are arranging themselves into a configuration that demands attention, whether you have been following astrology for years or you have only recently begun paying attention to these cycles. At this very moment, the Sun, traveling through Leo, reaches an exact opposition with Pluto in Aquarius. And that single alignment has the power to uncover realities that have remained hidden beneath appearances for far longer than they were ever meant to. You may believe everything has been under control, that difficult emotions have settled, that uncomfortable truths can continue waiting in the background. But this transit refuses to allow anything important to stay buried. It does not arrive quietly. It breaks through every layer of denial until what has been concealed can no longer remain invisible. Long-standing power struggles, emotional manipulation, silent resentment, and situations you have accepted simply because confronting them felt too overwhelming are now illuminated with unmistakable clarity. For 4 zodiac signs in particular, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, this energy is not unfolding somewhere in the distance. It is deeply personal. It reaches directly into your life, asking you to face something you may have sensed approaching without fully understanding why. If the last several days have carried an unusual emotional weight, if you have felt pressure building inside you without a clear explanation, if there has been an uneasy feeling in your chest, suggesting that an important conversation, revelation, or confrontation is getting closer, that sensation is not your imagination. There is a precise astrological reason behind it, and before this message is over, you will understand exactly why those emotions have been growing stronger. Stay with me, because understanding what is unfolding today changes the way you experience everything that follows. Before we explore the personal impact, however, it is essential to recognize why this date stands apart from an ordinary intense transit. The significance reaches far beyond a single opposition. It is connected to a much larger celestial architecture that very few people are discussing, one that has not appeared for decades, and by the time this week comes to an end, the landscape of many lives may feel dramatically different. The opposition itself is only the ignition point. Many people hear the word Sun opposite Pluto and immediately assume they are looking at another emotionally demanding day. Perhaps heightened sensitivity, workplace tension, or temporary conflict with people around them. That interpretation barely scratches the surface of what is actually happening. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the Sun arrives at exactly 4 degrees and 17 minutes of Leo, while Pluto occupies the identical degree in Aquarius. Together they create a flawless 180-degree opposition across the zodiac. On one side stands the Sun, representing conscious identity, personal expression, and the self you recognize every time you look inward. On the opposite side stands Pluto, the force associated with destruction of outdated structures, hidden influence, buried psychological material, and profound transformation that can only occur after something old has ended. When these two planetary forces meet with absolute precision, they create a confrontation between the version of yourself you consciously present and the deeper realities that have been operating beneath awareness. Yet even that description does not explain why this particular opposition is unlike those experienced in previous years. The reason lies within the broader sky. At this moment, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, 4 of the outer planets whose movements define entire eras rather than passing moods, are all gathered near the 4th degree of their respective signs. Their positions form an exceptionally uncommon geometric arrangement that astrologers identify as a cradle. Other astrologers know the same configuration as Barbet's basket, named in honor of the renowned French astrologer whose studies of planetary cycles were credited with anticipating events including the collapse of the Soviet Union and the worldwide crisis that emerged during the year 2020, long before those events unfolded. This remarkable pattern is composed of supportive trines and sextiles that weave together an intricate network of cooperative planetary relationships. Many astrologers regard it as one of the most constructive alignments to appear throughout the entire 21st century, because it symbolizes the transition from prolonged instability toward meaningful rebuilding and long-term renewal. Yet despite all of its extraordinary potential, this celestial framework has remained largely inactive. Slow-moving outer planets establish the structure, but they rarely provide the spark required to awaken its full influence. They wait for a faster-moving body to cross the necessary point, creating the catalyst that releases the energy waiting inside the pattern. Today, that catalyst arrives. As the Sun forms its exact opposition to Pluto, it strikes the foundation of this rare configuration like the first crack of lightning across a silent sky. The impact does not remain isolated between two planets. Instead, it sends waves of activation through every connection within the cradle, awakening energy that has been quietly accumulating for months. Once that dormant force begins moving, it seeks out anything that has survived only because it remained hidden. Every false appearance, every manipulative situation, every imbalance of power, every shadow that has escaped honest examination suddenly becomes vulnerable to exposure. Pluto has never been interested in cosmetic change. It reaches beneath appearances and works at the deepest possible level, dismantling the roots rather than trimming the visible branches. If that sounds overwhelming, it is only part of today's extraordinary story, because another equally significant shift unfolds alongside this opposition, creating a level of cosmic synchronization that surprisingly few people are talking about. This additional event transforms an already powerful day into a milestone capable of influencing an entire generation. On the very same day that the Sun stands opposite Pluto, the lunar nodes officially move into new signs. The North Node enters Aquarius, while the South Node moves into Leo. For those unfamiliar with the lunar nodes, imagine them as a navigational system guiding the evolutionary direction of humanity itself. The South Node represents the collective habits, emotional attachments, belief systems, and familiar patterns that have reached the end of their usefulness. It highlights what we are gradually releasing because continued attachment would prevent future growth. The North Node points toward the direction life is inviting us to embrace. It symbolizes the qualities, experiences, and collective evolution that call us forward, even when that journey feels unfamiliar. When these nodal changes occur on the exact same day as such a powerful Sun and Pluto opposition, the message becomes impossible to ignore. Humanity is not only being asked to reveal what has remained hidden, it is simultaneously being guided away from outdated ways of living and toward an entirely new evolutionary path. Understanding this connection is essential, because everything that follows grows directly out of this extraordinary convergence of celestial events. Beginning today, the movement of the South Node into Leo signals the start of a profound collective clearing that reaches far beyond individual experience. This is not a subtle adjustment taking place somewhere in the background of history. It marks the gradual dismantling of everything rooted in performance instead of authenticity, everything built upon the pursuit of admiration rather than genuine purpose. The patterns connected with ego-centered leadership begin losing their grip. The fascination with celebrity, the belief that status alone deserves unquestioned authority, and the exhausting search for approval from strangers all begin facing an unavoidable reckoning. Structures that once appeared permanent now reveal how fragile they truly are. Figures who relied on image more than integrity may discover that spectacle alone no longer protects their position. The symbolic stages that elevated certain individuals above everyone else begin to lose their stability, because this cycle is asking humanity to reconsider what real influence actually means. At the very same time, the North Node entering Aquarius points toward an entirely different direction for collective evolution. Rather than reinforcing old hierarchies, it encourages the emergence of shared responsibility. Instead of concentrating authority into the hands of a select few, it favors cooperation, innovation, and systems designed to benefit entire communities rather than feeding personal ambition. The emphasis shifts toward collective intelligence, decentralized power, and solutions that serve something greater than individual recognition. Now pause for a moment and place these nodal changes beside the exact Sun and Pluto opposition unfolding simultaneously. Suddenly, the larger picture becomes impossible to ignore. The Sun stands together with the South Node in Leo, while Pluto aligns with the North Node in Aquarius. This means the opposition is accomplishing far more than exposing hidden motives or revealing uncomfortable truths. It is participating in the removal of outdated structures of power while opening space for an entirely different chapter to begin. The message is repeated with remarkable precision across multiple layers of the sky, almost as though the universe refuses to leave any room for misunderstanding. The symbolism echoes itself again and again, until even those who have tried to ignore the growing tension can no longer pretend they do not feel it. If your emotions have seemed unusually heavy, if your body has carried an unexplained tightness, if there has been a persistent feeling that something significant is approaching, even though nothing visible has happened yet, there is a reason those sensations have been growing stronger. Your inner awareness has been responding to this convergence long before your conscious mind could explain it. Perhaps it began several days ago, perhaps even weeks ago. You may have dismissed it as stress or uncertainty, yet underneath those ordinary explanations, your intuition was recognizing that an important turning point was drawing near. You were sensing the approach of a moment capable of redirecting the course of your life, even before external events revealed themselves. Yet focusing only on what is ending would leave the story incomplete, because hidden within today's remarkable celestial design is another layer that changes the entire meaning of what is taking place. Very few people notice it, yet it quietly transforms destruction into possibility. While the exact opposition between the Sun and Pluto carries extraordinary intensity, its purpose is never limited to collapse alone. Immediately after that confrontation reaches perfection, another sequence begins unfolding with astonishing precision. Only 42 minutes later, the Sun forms a harmonious trine with Neptune in Aries. Then, later during the same evening, the Sun continues forward and creates a supportive sextile with Uranus in Gemini. These aspects reveal that today's cosmic pattern has been designed with remarkable balance. The Sun becomes the bridge connecting powerful forces that might otherwise feel overwhelming. First, it receives the penetrating, transformative intensity of Pluto. Then, almost immediately, it redirects that energy toward pathways capable of healing, understanding, and liberation. Neptune offers something essential during this process. Rather than allowing exposed truth to become fuel for revenge or bitterness, it introduces compassion, spiritual awareness, and the ability to soften the ego's instinct to defend itself at all costs. Neptune reminds us that even those caught inside painful struggles often carry wounds invisible to everyone around them. This influence creates the possibility of forgiveness, where resentment might otherwise become permanent. It encourages emotional release instead of endless conflict, making it possible to recognize that healing requires more than simply exposing what has gone wrong. Then, Uranus enters the picture with an entirely different gift. Once old structures finally fracture, and under this energy many of them inevitably will, Uranus provides the unexpected insight that could never have appeared while those structures remained intact. It delivers sudden clarity, innovative thinking, surprising opportunities, and unconventional solutions that seem to arrive exactly when the old path disappears. What once looked like a dead end unexpectedly reveals itself as the doorway into an entirely different future. The controlling circumstances that once seemed impossible to escape lose their power because a completely new perspective suddenly becomes available. This is why today's astrology cannot be understood as destruction alone. It represents transformation in its purest form. Every uncomfortable revelation serves a deeper purpose. Every breakdown contains the possibility of rebuilding on stronger foundations. Every ending quietly prepares the conditions necessary for an authentic beginning. That opportunity, however, depends upon remaining fully conscious throughout the process. Those who refuse to look at what is being revealed, who numb themselves, deny reality, or retreat into avoidance, risk missing the extraordinary wisdom hidden inside the discomfort. For 4 zodiac signs especially, this process becomes impossible to experience from a distance, because today's celestial geometry reaches directly into the most stable parts of their lives. Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius belong to the fixed modality, the signs known for preserving, maintaining, protecting, and remaining committed long after others would surrender. Cardinal signs naturally begin new cycles. Mutable signs adapt to changing circumstances, but fixed signs possess remarkable endurance. They anchor themselves with determination, loyalty, persistence, and extraordinary resilience. Their ability to remain steady through chaos is one of their greatest gifts. Yet every strength carries a corresponding vulnerability. The same unwavering commitment that allows them to endure tremendous challenges can also become resistance whenever profound transformation becomes necessary. Pluto understands this dynamic completely. When such a significant alignment occurs at 4 degrees of Leo and Aquarius, it automatically creates powerful geometric relationships through oppositions and squares with 4 degrees of Taurus and 4 degrees of Scorpio. As a result, anyone with personal planets, or especially sensitive placements within those early fixed degrees, enters an exceptionally concentrated field of pressure. The celestial forces surrounding them become intensely personal rather than merely symbolic. The more tightly they attempt to preserve outdated circumstances, identities, or emotional attachments, the greater the internal pressure becomes. Pluto does not seek resistance for its own sake, but it refuses to allow evolution to remain indefinitely postponed. The stronger the effort to hold on to what has already reached its natural conclusion, the more dramatic the eventual release is likely to become, setting the stage for the deeply personal transformations that these 4 signs are now being called to experience. There is one truth the fixed signs cannot afford to overlook today. Their greatest gift has never been avoiding change. Their true gift appears after they finally allow change to happen. Few signs possess the resilience that Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius carry within them. Once they release what has already reached its natural ending, they rebuild with a level of strength that often surprises even themselves. They do not simply recover from transformation. They become something far more grounded, wiser, and more powerful because of it. That is why today's celestial alignment presents such a defining crossroads. The decision is no longer whether change is coming. That decision has already been made by the movement of the heavens. The only remaining choice is whether to continue protecting something that is already fading away, or to release it willingly and reclaim the power that has always belonged to you. Every fixed sign is standing before that doorway now, and the way each experiences it is deeply personal. Let us begin with Taurus, because your lesson unfolds between 2 worlds that have been pulling against each other for much longer than you may have realized. For Taurus, today's exact opposition stretches across the 4th and 10th houses, creating one of the most significant axes within the natal chart. One side represents your home, your emotional roots, your private sanctuary, and the place where you feel truly safe. The opposite side represents your career, public responsibilities, reputation, and everything the outside world expects from you. These are not separate parts of your life today. They are confronting one another directly. The sun pours its full attention into your fourth house, illuminating your inner foundation so completely that emotions you have kept tucked away can no longer remain hidden. At the same time, Pluto occupies your 10th house, applying unrelenting pressure through professional expectations, authority figures, institutions, or definitions of success that have quietly demanded more and more from you over time. What becomes impossible to ignore today is the realization that the balance between these two worlds has gradually disappeared. Without fully noticing when it happened, you may have allowed outside expectations to become more important than your own emotional stability. Success may have slowly become measured by titles, achievements, approval, or responsibilities that never truly reflected what your heart needed. The cost of carrying that imbalance has been much greater than you admitted, not because you lacked awareness, but because enduring hardship has always come naturally to Taurus. You have a remarkable ability to remain steady under pressure, to keep moving forward even while carrying invisible burdens that few people recognize. Yet today's opposition asks you to examine an uncomfortable question. When does endurance stop being wisdom and begin becoming quiet self-abandonment? Pluto no longer allows silent erosion to continue unnoticed. It insists that genuine strength requires boundaries as much as perseverance. Reclaiming your authority begins by deciding that no career, no institution, no public image, and no external definition of achievement deserves greater importance than the peace inside your own foundation. If the sanctuary within you begins collapsing, then every outward accomplishment eventually loses its meaning. Today asks you to redefine success according to your own values, instead of allowing others to decide what fulfillment should look like. That realization becomes the first step toward restoring the balance your spirit has been longing for. For Leo, today's message reaches even more directly, because this opposition unfolds across your 1st and 7th houses, placing the spotlight on identity and partnership, on the relationship between the person you truly are and the person you become whenever another individual enters your life. The universe is presenting a question that may have followed you quietly for longer than you realized. Have you gradually hidden parts of yourself simply to preserve someone else's comfort? The sun, your ruling planet, shines brilliantly through your 1st house, encouraging complete authenticity, fearless self-expression, and the courage to exist exactly as you are, without apology or hesitation. Across the chart, however, Pluto occupies your 7th house, bringing profound intensity into your closest relationships. Partnerships may become magnetic, emotionally consuming, deeply transformative, and at times influenced by subtle struggles over control or emotional power. Under this opposition, hidden patterns finally become visible. Somewhere along your journey, you may have started editing your own light. Perhaps it happened so gradually that you hardly noticed. You may have stopped expressing certain dreams because someone close to you could not receive them. You may have softened your personality to avoid creating conflict. You may have invested your energy into supporting another person's growth, while quietly neglecting the creative fire that defines who you are. Perhaps you have continued offering warmth, encouragement, and love without receiving the same reflection in return. Today's movement of the South Node into your 1st house deepens this process even further. It begins dissolving the version of yourself that unconsciously depended upon another person's approval to confirm your value. The identity built around seeking validation through partnership begins falling away. In its place emerges a stronger version of Leo, one that understands worth does not depend upon applause, admiration, or external recognition. Your light exists because it is your nature to shine. It requires no permission, no audience, and no reflection from another person to become real. The Leo emerging from today's alignment is no longer performing for acceptance. This Leo leads from authentic inner confidence, fully aware that true radiance comes from self-recognition, before it is ever acknowledged by anyone else. Then we arrive at Scorpio, where today's transformation reaches extraordinary depth because the opposition activates your 10th and 4th houses, creating the exact opposite pattern experienced by Taurus. The sun illuminates your professional world, bringing visibility to your ambitions, responsibilities, achievements, and public identity. Pluto, meanwhile, continues its work within your 4th house, reaching beneath conscious awareness into the deepest emotional foundations of your life. On the surface, today's events may appear connected to career developments. A confrontation involving authority, an intense professional situation, or a moment that suddenly places you in the public eye may become the visible expression of this transit. Those experiences are significant, yet they are not the true center of the story. The deeper transformation is unfolding beneath everything others can see. Pluto has been quietly excavating inherited emotional patterns, early conditioning, ancestral influences, and psychological foundations that were established long before you possessed the language to understand them. As today's opposition reaches its exact point, an extraordinary realization may begin emerging from beneath those layers. The powerful ambition for which Scorpio is often recognized may not originate entirely from personal desire. Some portion of that relentless drive may have been fueled by something much older and much more vulnerable: the need to succeed, to achieve, to prove yourself beyond question, may have grown from emotional wounds carried since childhood, from family expectations placed upon you before you had the freedom to choose them, or from the quiet longing to earn approval from someone whose expectations could never truly be satisfied. It may have been connected to a parent, an inherited family dynamic, or a generational belief about worth that settled into your identity before you fully understood its influence. Today's opposition does not expose this truth to weaken you. It reveals it so you can finally recognize which ambitions genuinely belong to your soul and which have been silently directed by wounds that no longer deserve to define the course of your future. That awareness becomes the beginning of a transformation far deeper than professional success alone, and it prepares the ground for what this remarkable alignment will continue revealing next. For Scorpio, today's alignment refuses to let the past remain separated from the future any longer. The invisible wall that once allowed you to place your emotional history in one corner of your life and your professional ambitions in another begins to dissolve. You are no longer able to convince yourself that the two have nothing to do with each other. The deeper truth rising into awareness is that they have always been connected. The emotional patterns formed long ago have quietly influenced the goals you pursued, the pressure you placed upon yourself, and the standards you believed you had to reach. Today brings that connection into full consciousness. Pluto asks you to stop running from the deepest layers of your own story and instead descend willingly into them. It invites you to face inherited pain, family conditioning, and emotional burdens that have silently directed your decisions from behind the scenes. This journey is not about becoming trapped in the past. It is about finally understanding it so completely that it no longer controls your future. As those old wounds begin to heal, something remarkable happens. The force that once fueled endless striving does not disappear. It changes form. The same intensity that was once driven by unresolved pain rises into authentic confidence, becoming the foundation of genuine leadership. Instead of chasing recognition to satisfy invisible emotional needs, you begin leading from a place of inner stability that cannot be shaken by outside approval or criticism. That is the authority Pluto has been preparing you for all along. Then we arrive at Aquarius, the sign standing closest to the center of today's extraordinary transformation. Since the year 2024, Pluto has been moving through your first house, quietly reshaping your identity from the inside outward. If you pause for a moment and honestly compare yourself with the person you were 2 years ago, the difference is impossible to deny. Your perspective has evolved. Your priorities have shifted. Even the way you carry yourself communicates something entirely different. People who have known you for years often sense this change before they can explain it with words. They recognize that something fundamental has transformed, even if they cannot identify exactly what it is. Today's exact opposition places the Sun in your seventh house, directing powerful attention toward every important relationship in your life. Partnerships, friendships, family dynamics, and close personal connections all become mirrors reflecting how others are responding to the person you are becoming. Some people welcome your evolution, but others react with fear. Their discomfort is not necessarily caused by anything you have done. Instead, your growth quietly challenges the roles and expectations they had grown accustomed to. The version of you that once felt predictable, easy to understand, and willing to sacrifice personal evolution in order to preserve harmony is steadily disappearing. Not everyone is prepared to let that version go. Some individuals may unconsciously attempt to hold you in the identity they recognize. They may appeal to guilt, subtle emotional pressure, familiar expectations, or direct attempts to persuade you to remain exactly as you were. Today's opposition reveals something even more important. Part of you has allowed those influences to slow your own transformation because you feared the cost of fully becoming yourself. You may have wondered which relationships would survive. You may have questioned who would remain beside you if you continued changing. Yet, on this exact same day, the North Node enters your first house, delivering a message that could hardly be more direct. Your path points forward, not backward. Your future cannot be built upon preserving outdated versions of yourself simply to keep others comfortable. Reclaiming your personal power now means giving yourself complete permission to continue evolving, even when the process feels isolating. In fact, the moments that feel most lonely often become the moments that reveal your greatest strength. Beyond that temporary uncertainty lies a future so different that the person you used to be could scarcely imagine it. Everything unfolding today begins moving toward another powerful milestone only 2 days later. Nothing revealed during this opposition remains suspended without purpose. Every hidden truth, every imbalance of power, every emotional realization begins moving toward completion. As Wednesday, July 29th, brings a full moon in Aquarius at 6 degrees and 29 minutes, positioned less than 2 degrees away from the exact location where today's opposition ignited. This is far more than an ordinary full moon. By then, the Sun has advanced to form a conjunction with Jupiter, the planet associated with expansion, opportunity, abundance, and optimism at the very same degree in Leo. Together, the Sun and Jupiter create an extraordinary expression of confidence, heartfelt creativity, and authentic personal power. Imagine the symbolism unfolding across the heavens. On one side, the moon joins Pluto in Aquarius, encouraging collective transformation, emotional release, and the clearing away of everything that has reached the end of its purpose. Across the zodiac, the Sun stands beside Jupiter in Leo, radiating hope, creative renewal, courageous self-expression, and the reminder that genuine joy still exists beyond every difficult chapter. For Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, this full moon becomes the emotional release that completes the process begun today. The painful truths, uncovered on July 27th, whether connected with unhealthy professional environments, controlling relationship dynamics, inherited emotional patterns, or profound questions of identity, finally reach their highest point before beginning to dissolve. Jupiter's presence carries an especially meaningful promise. If you have been willing to face the truths Pluto revealed instead of turning away from them, the outcome is not loss, it is freedom. It is the arrival of new abundance precisely where unnecessary burdens once occupied space. The power reclaimed during this extraordinary week extends beyond your personal life. It contributes to something much larger, unfolding collectively. The rare celestial cradle, also known as Barbot's basket, the constructive arrangement formed by the outer planets, requires individuals who have courageously confronted their own shadows. It is sustained by people who have transformed personal darkness into authentic wisdom, rather than pretending those shadows never existed. That is the quality of leadership the emerging era calls for, and today's alignment marks the beginning of that process. This is why the present moment matters so deeply. The intensity you feel is not evidence that something has gone wrong. It is evidence that something profoundly meaningful is taking place. Pluto has never promised comfort, yet it always offers transformation for those willing to remain present through the process. The emotional pressure, the inner tension, the growing sense that life is preparing for a decisive breakthrough are not signals telling you to retreat. They are confirming that you have arrived exactly where your evolution requires you to stand. Today's events are not unfolding against you. They are unfolding in service of your future. Every truth that emerges, regardless of how challenging it feels at first, carries the information necessary for your next chapter. Every conflict reveals where authority has quietly been surrendered. Every confrontation identifies the place where your power is waiting to be reclaimed. Then, as the full moon rises on July 29th, and the emotional tide finally reaches its peak before beginning to recede, something inside you changes. A remarkable sense of lightness replaces the weight you have been carrying. Clarity arrives where confusion once existed. It feels as though an invisible burden has finally been laid down. Not because the entire world suddenly became different overnight, but because you allowed yourself to become different. The fixed signs have always possessed extraordinary endurance. Their strength is not measured by how tightly they cling to the past, but by how magnificently they rebuild once they release it. So when today's sun meets Pluto across the Zodiac and every hidden shadow rises into view, do not turn away from what you see. Remain fully present. Allow every revelation to teach you what it came to reveal. Beyond this confrontation stands the most genuine, empowered, and liberated version of yourself, patiently waiting for the exact moment when you are finally ready to step forward and meet it. Thank you for spending this time with me and sharing this journey through today's remarkable astrology. If this message resonated with you and you would like to continue exploring these powerful celestial cycles together, I invite you to subscribe so you will not miss future insights. I would also love to hear what this transit is bringing into your own life, so feel free to share your experiences and reflections in the comments. Until we meet again, take good care of yourself, and I look forward to seeing you in the next reading.